All right. So this is turning real life into fiction with authors Stephen Manchester and Susan Petrone. I'll let them introduce themselves and their books.
Hi, I'm Steve Manchester, and we just released a novel called Dad, a novel, so I'm super excited about this. Myself and Lou worked on the storyboard for quite a while. Definitely heartfelt, tearjerker, but three phases of fatherhood at different times. So same family, three different men, grandfather, dad in a midlife crisis, and then his 20-year-old son just finds out that he's going to have a baby, right? So we're able to do it at different stages, and the early feedback, and it was just released last Tuesday, but the early feedback's been phenomenal, and I'm real hopeful about this book reaching the masses.
My name is Susan Petrone. My latest novel with the story plan is The Heebie-Jeebie Girl, which just came out in paperback about a month ago. And Heebie-Jeebie Girl's been kind of described as Crime and Punishment set in 1977 Youngstown, only with jokes and magic. And I'm excited to talk to Steve today.
Yes.
Awesome. So
That's
what are
mutual.
some of the risks and rewards of like using real life to make fiction?
You can tick people off in your family or people you know. I mean,
yeah, there's two sides to that, right? I think that being real and relatable in fiction is how you get people to actually remember your work, right? So I think good writers make people think, great writers make people feel. Susan and I are trying to go for the latter there, right? And I think it's also a way to honor people, right? I mean, I don't think you ever want to land directly on somebody when you're building a character, based on them. But, if you're throwing a few different people that into a blender, I think it's also a way to honor people. And again, to Susan's point, the risk is, putting something down that somebody wouldn't appreciate, but that's the other side of the coin.
Yeah, or if you're using like real life locations, this is set in 1977 Youngstown. So some things do change, buildings and streets get moved, or, buildings get demolished, they move streets, the neighborhood where the book takes place really doesn't even exist anymore. So you're relying on like maps and memory. And sometimes people say, and sometimes you have to change things like to make the geography fit. Like, if you have these two characters and they're walking somewhere or driving somewhere and you have to change the geography to make it fit that conversation. People say, well, it takes a lot longer to get to blah, blah, blah. Or so sometimes people, if you're using real life places, people say, no. And it's, inspired by real places, inspired by real events. So that is another one. Yeah, somebody's always going to say, that's not how it happened, or that's not, it takes 20 minutes to get over to 271 from that place, not 5 minutes. Have you gotten, like Steve, like feedback from people? I understand that that there was a real life event that inspired the writing of Dad.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. So so my dad passed away 3 years ago. I was actually blessed to be there with him. I held his hand as he left. And Lou and I talked about it, a few months after that, and thought that this was the time for me to write a book like this, right? Because the book Dad is really, a thank you letter to my father. So it's, it's just a wealth of gratitude toward him, but also it's been an opportunity for me to show the love that I have to my children, right? So, the one thing that I put in the book, and this was kind of the inspiration for it, but, the book is dedicated to all fathers, right? Especially those who went on to earn the title Dad. And I think there's a significant difference. And I really wanted to, portray that within the book. So yeah, thank you for asking me that question. And if you don't mind, right back at you. I understand that the Heebie-Jeebie Girl is based on some real life events in your family, and I was hoping you could share some of that with us.
Sure. So, I mean, it's not a spoiler to say that the crux of the Heebie-Jeebie Girl is about a little girl who can correctly pick the daily lottery number, the 3-digit. And there was a time period, and this was like in the 80s, that I had a cousin, one of my Youngstown cousins, my whole family's from there. One of my cousins went through this period, like 6 months, where she would correctly pick the daily number. And like my grandma and my aunt won a lot. of money. Like, and my uncle told me at one point that he's like, yeah, I called home and they had just drawn the number and they were screaming because they had won like $2,500 at a pop. And, you know, $2,500 in 1982, not bad. And my grandmother was scammed and robbed of, you know, she was what, that generation that kept all the money at home, and she was robbed. And it was like 10 grand that someone took from in cash. So that event kind of always stayed with me, because you go, well, who would do that? You know, who would do that? And so I started imagining, well, who would do that? And why would that person do that? So that was the crux of the story for the Heebie Jeebie Girl. And then, and I'm sure you learned this too, Steve, that like number one rule, if you are writing about real life, just because it happened in real life doesn't mean it has to happen in the book.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, no, we take a lot of license, right? Which I think we need to, right, in order to make timeframes work and to make settings work. And I think our job, right, is to take a story, believe that story the way an 8-year-old would, right, and then put it down on paper and make it somebody else's story. So if if Susan and I actually write about a grandmother and we give you every single detail about that grandmother, it's almost impossible for that to become your grandmother. So if we give you 70-80% of it, all of a sudden that character becomes endeared to you. And then we've done our job, right? So our, what started off as our story becomes your story. And then that's the second half of the conversation, right? So we write the story, and then the feedback becomes part of that dialogue, which is absolutely fantastic. And I think that's where the magic is, when you're writing that real life, relatable type fiction.
That makes sense. And that's funny, because I know you write very like fiction that's grounded in reality. And I have this tendency to like throw in magical realism. I just do.
Right.
So, like if that's how the story comes out, you run with it. But I think that doesn't negate the fact that you can still have it be based on real life. It can still have, you can still have magic happen in real places. My first two novels, Grow Like a Woman and The Super Ladies, were both set in Cleveland. And The Super Ladies especially has elements of magical realism to it. But that doesn't mean that it can't be set in a very real place, and
right.
that maybe something extraordinary can happen to normal women from a suburb. And just like, I think one of the reasons that I added traces of magical realism to this book was because, it takes place in Youngstown, and actually Youngstown is one of the narrative voices. And, Youngstown is one of those cities that gets a bad rap. So why not give it its own voice, and why not celebrate it and lift it up? And so far, I haven't met anyone who said, "Oh, I don't think Youngstown would talk like that." So I'm glad about that.
And I'm sure they appreciate it, right? I mean, showing that type of respect and bringing recognition to those folks. And that's a powerful thing, right? To be able to have that stick and use it, for the good. And hopefully, folks in my area, they get a huge kick out of certain, it's almost like when I was a kid, I love reading Robert Spencer, right? So Robert Parker, Spencer for Hire, and everything's based in Boston, and where he eats, the names of the streets, and I loved it because I had been there. I had eaten some of those things. I drank a Sam Adams, right? So you have all that stuff that's going on. So to be able to take that and put it in the area that I grew up in, brings big respect, and people love that. My readers in California, Nevada, it makes no difference to them, but because it's so familiar to me, it's actually easy. I can spend more time working on the dialogue or working on the plot, the character development, not worry so much about the setting, because the setting is very real to begin with.
Yes. And there is that delight as a reader when you recognize something like a place that you've been to. And I name drop them. I always name drop like one of my favorite restaurants in every book. Just because now the bad thing is like several of them have closed since then. So I'm like, maybe I should stop doing that. But one reopened. It was the pandemic. But some of the best writing advice I ever got ages and ages ago from Mary Doria Russell, author of like The Sparrow and many other wonderful books. And this was something that somebody told her, every word in your book should do one of three things: advance the plot, develop character, or delight the reader. And I think when you use real life situations and real life places in the right way, then you are definitely doing the last.
Yeah, that's very well said, and that's great advice. I like to work with a lot of young writers as well, and I'm not talking about age, right? Just different. We're in different stages of our careers, and
Emerging.
exactly, right. But I tell folks, it's like whatever you put into it is what people are going to get out of it, right? If I don't laugh while I'm writing, I don't expect my reader to laugh, and if I don't cry, I don't expect my reader to cry. The ironic part is that my background's in law enforcement and the military, and I actually write tearjerkers. So Dad, even though people will look at that cover and think, oh my God, this is a book for men, it's actually us kind of peeling back the curtain to reveal what it's like to be a man, to be a father, a grandfather, a son. And that I see my wife and my daughter, or my mom and my sisters, and it's such, the complexity in those relationships is unbelievable. Nothing that I would ever even pretend to understand. So I think those same complexities, those same mysteries, take place within those male relationships. But we really wrote this book and put it out there for females, mothers, daughters, and sisters, to understand a little bit behind the scenes of what it's like to be a dad. And even though I'm yelling and I'm growling, right, I may be dying inside, right, and I'd rather cry, but I'm trying to instill certain things in my children. So yeah, it's been to me, again, like if I can't get emotional about something, I don't expect my readers to, and that to me is what's real and relatable.
Yeah, and I love how you said that you wrote that for like for your female readers,
right?
And and you mentioned earlier something about when we were talking about like risk and rewards, and I think that the reward is those deeper relationships. And it was weird because most of the characters in Heebie Jeebie Girl are based on actual family members. Only one appears by name, my Uncle Ed. Then he, with his blessing, he wanted to be in it. Everyone else is, you have to rename them. But two of the primary characters were my maternal grandmother and a great uncle, her brother. And I didn't know them as well as I would have liked. My grandma was kind of a difficult person, and my cousins will say the same thing, especially the cousins that lived there. So I'm not making that up. But a lot of the difficulties that maybe that character has in the book were things that she also faced. So, mitigating circumstances. And I never really got to know my great uncle as well as I would have liked. But being able to write about them, I don't know if you found this when you were writing about your dad, you're kind of like creating a mythology for these people and kind of getting to know them in a new way rather than, most of us get to know our relatives by, you sit in the living room and you hear grandma or grandpa tell the same story like 50 times. And the stories are great. But when you start kind of, as a writer, when you start looking at them and thinking of them as these living, breathing people and trying to really literally put yourself in their shoes, you get a different perspective on them. And, obviously, anytime you're writing a character based on a real person, it's kind of like the what if. So you start with this, and like you said, you do a mishmash of a lot of people, or you start with that what if, and then the character grows from there. But it was a really neat way to get to know those people in a different way.
Right.
And I treasure that. That was like a wonderful, unintended, unforeseen benefit from writing about real family.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And, there's always some research that goes into this, right? So,
yeah.
The cliche in our industry is, you write what you know, who you know, where you've been. And that's true to some degree, right? But, again, you want to respect boundaries, right? So you have to fictionalize a lot of it. But I did some research, and I realized or learned things about, my family that I didn't know, even going into this book. But what I love about this book, and I think it's the underlying or the underpinning, when we write reality-based fiction, right, emotionally charged type of fiction, I think what happens is, nobody ever wants to feel alone, right? So when you read Dad, it may not be 100% the way you feel or think, but there's going to be elements in that story where you're like, wow, I feel the same way. I don't feel alone. So not that we're all in the same boat, but we're in, we're on the same
A boat.
fleet. Yeah, exactly.
We're in a boat on
Ex-
maybe on the same water, may not be
Right.
maybe not the same boat, but humanity's all the same water.
Absolutely. And it's about connecting, right? So it's about us connecting with our readers and vice versa.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I've heard other writers, call their readers fans. It's like, for me, I couldn't be any more grateful, right? And I love getting that feedback, and it doesn't have to be praise, right? But I love getting that feedback from readers because it is making that connection, right? It's, I spend months and months, as you know, Susan, right? It's a bit of a neurotic journey, right? Where you're by yourself and you're in your head and you think, I wonder how this is going to be received, and let me just kind of move the story along. And then the story gets released, and then people come back to you. And then there are times I'll even forget, like, oh, wow, that was one of the goals that I had. And I actually met that goal because of, this person's response to it. So it's just absolutely fantastic.
The hearing from readers is fantastic. And it's funny because even if there's something that they don't like, there was a library near Youngstown that did a blog post about the Heebie-Jeebie Girl, and they like really, really liked it. And they're like, pretty much the only negative was there is a scene at a wedding and there's not a cookie table at the wedding. And cookie tables are a Youngstown thing where like instead of maybe you'll have cake, but then you also have like a table with people bring cookies to share. Cause like sometimes I believe it started with when people maybe didn't have enough money for like to pay a baker for a big old cake. So have cookies. So there's a cookie table. For whatever reason, my family sucks. So the weddings that I went to with my Youngstown relatives didn't have a cookie table. So, when you want to talk about the risks of writing about real places or real events, you might miss the cookie table, and somebody will call you on it. But it was a gentle call.
Right.
Now, when you have based characters on people, have you had people like say, "Is that me?"
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. All the time. And my answer is just a smile, right? There is no yes or no. I'll just smile. Again, I really, really go out of my way because these stories are going to last much longer than my life, right? So I'd never want to disrespect somebody or bring them to a place where it's like, you kind of betrayed what you and I share, right? Whether it's a conversation or, so I'm very, very cognizant of that I don't do that. And there's people in my world that haven't been gracious or kind. And for me, it's not a place for me to, you know what I mean? To seek, any type of justice or vengeance. Right.
Really?
But I have had people come to me and ask me, and and again, I just smile like, well, there are obviously, pieces of you in this character. Right. But, I'm just not taking that one person and then, developing a character based completely on them. That's not happening.
No. And I don't think you can, because they're going to morph because like we said, you can't, just because something happened in real life doesn't mean it has to happen in the book.
Right.
Just because someone is like that in real life doesn't mean that has to be their character trait, because it may not work for the story that you're telling. You're writing a novel is like, driving to Cincinnati. We can take a bunch of different ways to get there.
Right.
You're all still going to get there, but it's how do you want to tell that story? How do you want to get there?
Yeah, it's all about the story. You're absolutely right. It's not, some people get really stuck on the mechanics of things, and it's important, right? But it's really about, like, when it's all said and done for me, I really truly hope that I'm known for being a storyteller, right? People say a writer, an author, best-selling author, but at my bones, I'm a storyteller, the same way my grandfather was, the same way my father was. So it's kind of a legacy that, releasing Dad a novel is just another feather to say, we're carrying on that tradition in our family.
That's nice. And I realize I must be more petty than you, Steve, because once in a while, if there is a character, I have given two different characters in different books, just the first name, not the full name, just the first name of, like, say, an elementary school nemesis who was really mean. And maybe they weren't the nicest characters.
Got it.
Yeah, so bookish, nerdy girls do like their revenge served very, very, very cold, like ice cream cold, which is, who doesn't like ice cream?
Right.
And again, I would never use someone's full name, and I don't I'm not malicious, but sometimes there is that there may be two people in the world who would recognize the first name of one of those characters and giggle.
Right.
And if I've delighted those readers it's like getting one of the private jokes on The Simpsons, you know, there are jokes that go by and go, somebody somewhere in Omaha is laughing at that. So there's someone somewhere that finds that little Easter egg amusing. I'm all for it.
Win-win. I get it. Plus, I mean, obviously, you know, when you feel that emotional about something, right, it can't help but to pour out of the pen, right? So I to say that I do it any differently is wrong. I just conceal it a little bit better, right? So I like the trick to really telling a good story, I believe, and I know that there are writers who are completely plot driven. For me, it's all about character development. So if I can get you into a character and really get you inside their head, inside their heart, whether you love them or hate them, it's insignificant to me. It's just the only thing we're trying to stay away from is indifference, right? But if there are people that have been vile to me or have done, you know, wronged my children or something, it's an inspiration. I'm not saying it's not. I won't use their names, but you will feel it when you read the character, right?
Especially if they wronged your kid. Ooh.
All right, there you go.
Oh.
Right, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a trip. I mean, it's you know, what I love about this craft too, right, is I'm not sure it can ever be mastered. I certainly know it can't be perfected. So I continue to be a student of the game, and I love, again, that feedback. You know, I recently went to a book signing where there was a gentleman across me. I ended up finding out he was a professor, a college professor, and I mean, he tore me up. And we get to the end of it. I was with somebody else, and you know, I was able to match wits, and we battled back and forth vocally, right, but verbally. Then when I left, the person that I was with, I was laughing, and they're like, "How can you not be upset about this?" I said, just look at the passion that this person had for this book, right? If it was indifference, he's never going to talk about the book. He's going to talk about the book, and there's a chance that other people are going to pick up the book and then have their own opinions, right? So
Yeah.
it's, you know, for me, it's about writing for my kids, writing for my family, staying true to that. And as long as I do that, if, you know, people love it, I'm grateful. If people hate it, let's try more, you know, we'll try on the next one, right? So it's, you know, that's the game. Yeah.
Now, are you working on, like, I know my work in progress is somewhat related to, somewhat based on real life. What are you working on? And is it also based on a real life event or real life people?
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, I'm as you are, I'm sure, right? If you're a writer, you're right? So it's,
Right.
you're always working on something. I'm the type of person who, you know, I have to be 20, 30,000 words into some notes and a storyboard, and, you know, to even admit to myself that I'm working on a book. I'm yet to present it to Lou, and I know he's on this, you know, watching, but at some point I'm going to want to sit with him and present my idea. And then, you know, he's brilliant when it comes, as you know, when it comes to storyboards and developing, fleshing out these stories. But I want to give a little bit of traction on this. Like another thing with this new release, Dad, it just came out last week. This is a powerful story. It's a powerful book. I know I want to give everything I can. One of the problems that I have is, you know, I put out a book a year, right? So you know, you'll release a book and I'm already on to the next book. And I think I want to pay more attention to the release of this one. And I do put a lot of work into, you know, promoting and marketing, but probably even more so with this because I connect so much more. And I think when I look at the audience, I think we have a much wider, a broader audience that would connect with this story.
Do you think you're wanting to pay more attention or nurture Dad along a little bit more than some of the other books because it came from such a personal place or so much from your real life?
Yeah, no, I do. Absolutely, I do. Yeah, because it's you know, it's a legacy that was passed on, you know, from my grandfather to my father. Like if you come to my house at Christmases, which, you know, you're going to get a gift and you're going to unwrap the gift and, you know, good for you, right? But if you sit at my dining room table, you have to bring a story with you, right? And you have to share that story. So in my family, the tradition is everybody tells a story, and sometimes those stories are repeated, right? So in this book, this is almost a culmination of that, right? So it means that much to me, not just saying thank you to my dad and I'll see you on the other side, right? But also looking to my children saying, this was the greatest job I've ever had, ever. And I've done some crazy things in my life, and some really important things, but, you know, being your dad, not just your father, but being your dad has meant everything to me. So it's important that I
Aw.
put the time into getting that message out.
That's very sweet. I
Thank
know.
you.
Yeah, you're making me feel all the feels.
So let's hear about what you're working on.
Yeah, so it's when I tell this to people who know me and know my family, they go, oh. So it's a tentative working title is The Swinging Santoros, and it's about a family of musical prodigies and the one kid who isn't. And again, when I tell that to people who know me and my family, they go, oh, really isn't. I'm like, shut
Yeah, a
up.
little autobiographical, right?
So just a little, but I think
Yeah.
it is one of those things where you're taking maybe a feeling, even if it's just like a feeling of maybe not fitting in your family of origin,
Right.
even if you did, but it's that you're taking that kernel of a story and finding the places where hopefully other people can relate to that, because I think we've all felt out of place somewhere at some time. I'm pretty sure everyone has felt out of place at some point in their life. And so hopefully that's, I think that may be the crux of this story.
I
That
love
and
it.
music. Yeah, that and
I love the
music.
title, and I'll tell you, I love the essence of it too, right? And obviously, I'm going to want to read that, but yeah, it sounds super relatable, right? And again, how can you read a book like that and feel alone, right? When somebody else has experienced the same things, right? So I think that's the gift. It really is.
Hope so.
Very cool.
I just got to finish writing it.
Yeah, you will.
Oh yeah. And Emma, did you have questions? Steve and I just obviously we just can talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to you guys and I was wondering if you have any family members who kind of know that you tend to write stories based off of people, if they try to sneak peeks at your pages, because I definitely have a sister who tries to sneak peeks at my pages.
Awesome. You want to go first?
Yeah. So I'm a sharer, right? And I've been at it for so long, and I've written so much. So there's a certain process that goes along. My family, some of them are almost like beta team members, right? So I'll throw stuff off them, and so when the book comes out, some people will laugh and be like, I don't have to read the book, I've lived it, right? But I give people the opportunity whether or not they want to hear it, because it can be, overwhelming. And usually when I finish a book and the manuscript's done, I'll apologize to my wife and I'll take her out for a nice dinner, because I've lived in two worlds at one time, right? So she gets all the peaks that she wants into that story. And I love sharing. I mean, to me, that's part of the journey, right? Because other than that, it is a neurotic type of, path that we take.
Listening to the voices in your head? What are you talking about?
Exactly.
Totally normal. With the Heebie-Jeebie Girl, the titular title is truly based on one of my cousins, who did pick those numbers. So she did get to read it beforehand, and I talked to her a lot, and kind of it is published with her permission and her blessing, because
very cool.
I didn't want to offend her or feel like I was kind of infringing on her privacy.
Right.
So with other things, most of the time, if it's just like a character, there was a friend in one of the characters in Throw Like a Woman, very shares a couple of characteristics with a very dear friend, and she actually posted something on social media. It's like that moment when you see yourself in your friend's book, and you're like, yes, that is you. The art therapist with the bright blue eyes. I'm like, okay, that's enough that she recognized herself. I'm like, I love it. And in the Heebie-Jeebie Girl, some of the other cousins, which I gave Velvet Underground names to, because based on who one of the parents was, the cousins that's really based on are like, oh, yes. They totally loved that I had chosen those names for them. So that was okay. So I think it is a tricky thing, and this is the Heebie-Jeebie Girl was definitely the closest that I've come to writing from life and a real thing. So I'm one of those people that I don't normally have beta readers read something until I have like a finished manuscript. I'm not like, here, read this chunk, because I feel like whatever fire is making you write the book can get it easily extinguished if you share too much while you're writing.
Right. That's a good point.
So, but in certain cases, when you're naming the book after somebody, then yes, you definitely want to
Right.
get their permission. Other than that, no sneak peeks.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, that's all the time we have for today. This has been great. So this has been Turning Real Life into Fiction with Stephen Manchester and Susan Petrone. Thank you guys so much. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Emma.
Thanks for having
Thanks,
us.
Susan.
Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.